All right. Hello, biology people. Here to get into a really good concept, really neat concept. The reason that I am a biologist, we get into a huge concept today. Up to this point, I don't know how you felt with the semester, but I suspect it may be a little bit different than what you thought biology would be, right? We spent a lot of time with chemistry, macromolecules, different reactions, dehydration synthesis, all that stuff. So we started at the atomic level. We go to small molecules, macromolecules. Today we're going to hop over to a very profound concept, right? The concept of life, the concept of cells. So in this course, 1306, we don't address viruses. We know viruses have a huge impact on our society, on our lives. But if you take biology 1307, we get to spend a lot of time discussing viruses. But for now, we're going to hop over from this chemistry level all the way up to then our cells. So again, I'm excited. I don't know about you, but finally, it's taken us 7 chapters to get to this point. But finally, we get to talk about life. We get to talk about biology, right? So life is this profound concept. Again, different hypotheses on how life began, different beliefs on how life began. I'm not here to challenge or get into the idea of how life started. We're here to see what does it imply if something is alive, right? So what is life? So I think a really dramatic picture here, lightning and just, right? We have chemistry, non-life, and then now we have life, which opens in our study for biology. So our very first discussion now on life is that it doesn't make sense. It's strange, right? What kind of math, right? How can we add up these things? Non-living nucleic acids, non-living proteins, non-living carbohydrates, non-living lipids, and we put all these together, and from those non-living things, non-living plus non-living plus non-living plus non-living, how do those 4 things then combine to generate life, right? It doesn't make sense, and we call that an emergent property, right? The enigma, the puzzle, the mystery, the enigma of emergent properties, right? How do non-living components combine together to form life? We know that each one of these things has its own identity, these foods. Like when you go buy groceries, you buy individual components, but then when you put them all together in a meal, it's just delicious, right? It takes the individual components combined together, make something much more complex, much more delicious, right? You have individual band members, maybe. Each band member is good at what they do, but now you put them together, they're harmonized, they're synchronized, they're in sync together, and you then generate this really good music, right? So the idea of life not making sense, right? But it's life, and we're here, right? So the opposite, or I should say, a big distinction between living things and non-living things. Molecules are non-living. Humans, you and I, your dog, your cat, we are living. And what does that imply? So there are important characteristics that sort of qualify life. Right? What does it mean for something to be alive? First, there's a potential for reproduction. So our cells are alive, you're alive. You have then the potential to have an offspring. Your cells have the potential to repair themselves if they are damaged. So reproduction. Oh, PG-13, right? We have little beetles procreating life at that moment, right? Now, when life happens, right? When we have conception, life begins sort of small, and we have this process of growth, of development in a very orderly fashion, right? So if you notice this flower, all these seeds, that's not random, right? That there's some it's just an orderly process, right? It's a lot of symmetry there, a lot of things that are going on at, in an orderly fashion. You can see when this child grows, right? He's going to grow in a sort of in a linear type of process there, right? For a while. This baby, right? So we have a baby here that is basically developing, right? And that's how all of us started life. So we start life as a uh, 2 cells, a fertilized egg, and then we go from there. So the idea of growth, development, physically and also intellectually, right? So if you put a kindergartner in a calculus class, they might probably going to struggle because their brain isn't quite ready for all the just the abstract idea of calculus, the computations that are required, that kind of stuff. So yeah, if you have little brother and sister, you know that, yeah, they're intelligent, but they're not intelligent as when they're older, right? And you were more intelligent now than when you were as a kid. You're able to process more information. You're able to sort of look farther ahead, cause and effect, that kind of stuff. So complexity, right? Growth and development physically, intellectually, and it happens up to a point, and then we kind of start to go backwards, right? If sad to see elderly people that start to forget things, or their brain is just sort of deteriorates and they just kind of start to go backwards. But these are, again, 3 of the important qualities of life. There's some more. Every living thing has the ability to utilize energy. We're going to call that metabolism. Every living entity has the ability to metabolize. We take in one source of energy and convert it into something else, right? So we eat food, and that enables us to go run a marathon, or we eat a snack and it enables us to go to work, or that kind of stuff. So energy utilization, metabolism, response to the environment, right? So in this case, again, the orangutans are responding to a food source in their environment. They consume the food source and then they metabolize that for energy. This plant is a living thing, right? It's responding to its environment. It's not growing straight up. If you notice, it's growing towards the window. So it was aware somehow of its environment, and it says, if I grow to the darkness, it's not enough light, I'm not going to be healthy. Or if I go to the light, there's some more of a photosynthetic source that I can metabolize for energy. So again, responding, there must be an appropriate response to the environment. I don't know exactly what's happening with this young cheetah. It looks like it's running. I don't know if it's responding to a prey item to the right, or maybe some other larger predator to the left. But again, part of staying alive is having an appropriate response to our environment. So again, if you're a deer, first of all, I don't know why they go to the road, right? There's no food on the road. But if you're on the road and there's a car approaching, that is an appropriate response, right? To jump and get out of the way. I like reptiles, but this is a sad situation, right? You're a little turtle and there's a car approaching. Well, you have one response, and that's to you go up in your little shell, right? And in that situation, their response is the incorrect one, because then they're going to get squashed there, right? So there must be a correct response to any type of environmental threat, basically. So you don't end up as a road killer. So 2 more to go, right? So very, very critical, big time concept for life is the idea of homeostasis. So homeostasis we're going to define as a state, a physiological state, a body state of dynamic balance. So in your body, there is a set point for many things, where we try to keep these aspects in that balance point, like body temperature, right? 98.6, we're supposed to be at that balance point. If we've had some cold days, if it starts to get too cold, our body starts to shiver, or we respond by putting on a jacket, right? So as our temperature starts to go sort of to the not enough heat, deficiency of heat, we then try to get that back and correct it back to balance, to that 98.6. If we have big jacket and we go outside and it's very sunny and warm, then we start to get too hot, right? So we then start to sweat, or we again, by behavioral sort of behavioral sort of adaptation, we then take off our coats, right? We help our body get back to that balance point. Think of many things, right? Thirst, right? If you're thirsty, we don't have enough water in the system, right? If you have a heartburn, maybe you ate too much, excessive food. If you have cancer, there's too many cells that are dividing. If you're diabetic and you're hypoglycemic, there's not enough glucose in circulation. So think of any and every disease that affects humans, right? And we can trace it back to homeostasis. If the body is unable to get it back to that balance point, if day after day after day after day, we cannot get back to that homeostatic point, we say that there's an illness, that person is sick, they're ill. So again, most of you are going into the nursing profession, into the allied health profession. So this is the concept that's gonna pay your bills, right? This is what you do. If you're a doctor, what do you try to do? You try to get the patient back into that homeostatic point by surgical procedures, by prescription of medication, whatever the case is. Their body's not able to get back into homeostasis, so they require sort of external assistance to do that, right? So if you go into the health field, basically you're going into the homeostatic field, right? Trying to help patients that cannot get back into homeostasis to get back into homeostasis. So this is, again, a big deal. If we cannot maintain homeostasis over time, that body will not be able to continue survival. That can be fatal. It will be fatal if we can't maintain homeostasis. So all of these are again, important characteristics of life. This last one is a characteristic of life, but it goes beyond the individual organism, right? This evolutionary adaptation basically is survival of the entire species, right? And it's a more, how do we say, prolonged type of situation. It's going to affect parents, offspring, the offspring's offspring, and it's going to affect multiple generations, right? So we say it's an evolutionary aspect. So when we talk about evolutionary adaptation, we go back to some Darwinian ideas, where we talk about natural selection, survival of the strongest, survival of the fittest, only the strong survive, that which does not kill you makes you stronger, sort of all these concepts. So in nature is quite harsh. And when I say nature, I'm kind of removing the human sort of animal from that system. So if you get hurt, you can go call an ambulance. You can go to the doctor. Right? If you're a wild lion on the Serengeti plains, if you're a polar bear up in the Arctic, if you're a chimpanzee in the forest, right? If you get injured, there's not 911 that can be called, right? So if there's an individual cub or some little animal that's born with some birth defect, typically that little animal is not going to be able to survive, right? So over evolutionary history, only the strong survive. And that we see this a lot with life all around us. Again, humans, we don't really follow this this idea, but and this is sort of harmful for the species. So, but if we think of bacteria, right? Bacteria becoming resistant to antibiotics, right? So the weaker bacteria are being killed, the strong bacteria are surviving, and then those are the ones that are reproducing. If you know something about cockroaches will never go extinct because they're so well at adapting, right? And they have a lot of offspring, they reproduce rapidly. So the weak individuals, the flawed individuals, the malformed individuals, they're going to die off. And the healthy, the strongest cockroaches will continue to reproduce, ensuring that their offspring is healthy. And the same will happen with their offspring. And if there's any mutations that enhance survival, those mutations then continue to be sort of passed along that we can say evolutionary lineage there, that trajectory of genetics. So important, right? For a species has to be able to continue reproducing, or that species dies. You know, we look back at the dinosaurs; they were very dominant, but their environment changed, right? And they were not then able to adapt. They were not then able to continue reproducing, and they eventually died off. Right? So important for the species to continue to survive, the idea of evolutionary adaptation. So hope all that's making sense, right? Now, all of those life qualities are then going to be bound within one plasma membrane, right? And this gives us the idea now of the cell. So cells are the fundamental units of life. We cannot get simpler than the cell and still be talking about life. So we go simpler than the cell, we're back into the world of chemistry, right? Or viruses. But those are non-living entities. We look now at the cell theory, that every living thing out in the world is made up of cells. And where do these cells come from? Well, cells come from pre-existing cells. And where do you come from? Well, from mom and dad. Where did mom and dad come from? From their mom and dad, right? Life procreates more life. And again, where did that first living cell come from? Well, again, it's that where life originated from, right? That sort of theoretical Eve, that cell then that procreated more life and then started to undergo mutations and different type of reproductive modifications. And we have the diversity that we see today. Right? Over 4.6 billion years of planet Earth, a lot of time for these changes to happen. So we're talking about cells. Cells are little functional units. One cell is functional, can exist by itself. But we start to see, some organisms are single cell, but we start to see then this idea of multicellularity, that the cells are basically teaming up, combining together, making up multicellular, larger type of organisms. So again, important concepts for the cell theory. So this next bit, I'm going to right now discuss the idea of a prokaryotic cell, and then I'm going to kind of stop and leave the eukaryotic cell for a second lecture here. But we know that these are cells. We know that they're alive. But just like with everything, when something first comes out, it's relatively simple. And a car, a computer, a video game, whatever. So the version 1 is okay, it functions, but there's a lot of room for improvement, for modification. So that version 1, if you will, the first type of cells, we're going to call prokaryotic cells. They're relatively simple cells. They still have all those life qualities, but they're relatively simple compared to the eukaryotic cells, right? And prokaryotic cells are basically bacterial cells. It's like a synonymous term. Regular people say bacteria. Doctors and sort of medical people would say the word prokaryotic infection. This person has a prokaryotic infection. Everybody, was that like a bacterial infection? Yes, it's a prokaryotic infection. So prokaryotic cells equal bacterial cells. And they're going to have only 4 minimal qualities, all the life qualities, and then 4 simple anatomical features, and no organelles will be present. So we look at the 4 minimal features, right? Which we've talked about some of these before. Right? We know about a plasma membrane, that phospholipid bilayer, hydrophilic, hydrophobic, hydrophilic, integral membrane proteins, that boundary that separates the inside from the outside of the cell. Right? If I ask you right now to draw a cell, I bet you would draw a circle or some sort of oval or some sort of just roundish structure. Well, that roundish structure represents the plasma membrane, right? That's going to separate the inside from the cell from the outside of the cell. That cell needs a boss. The cell needs genetic instructions that it received from mom and dad, instructions that are going to command the cell and control the cell. And those are the molecules, the nucleic acids, right? DNA, which transcribes to RNA. We need a worker, right? Remember, DNA doesn't do much, right? It needs the enzymes, it needs other workers to carry out its transcription and then translation. Well, then these are going to be the workers here that we call ribosomes. Ribosomes are actually critical for the process of translation, right? So they're going to help convert that messenger RNA sequence into that amino acid chain. And all of these molecules, the DNA, the RNA, the ribosomes, are all floating in this soup, this aqueous environment that we call the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm has a lot of ions. It has nutrients, amino acids. It has just enzymes, everything that's required for that cell to function. And again, all bounded by that plasma membrane. So plasma membrane plus nucleic acid plus ribosomes plus that fluid, the cytoplasm, all function together. They have the life qualities, and we call this a prokaryotic cell. So again, the plasma membrane, this should be familiar to you, that sort of little diagram, IMPs, phospholipid bilayer. That membrane is acting like that big bouncer person, right? They're going to regulate who comes into the club. If there's problems in the club, they're going to kick these people out. So they regulate what goes into the cell, what stays in the cell, and what goes out of the cell. And by doing so, by this regulatory function, they help the cell maintain a constant internal environment. And you should be able to replace that with, let's say, two terms, right? They're going to help the cell maintain equilibrium, right? Maybe that word, isotonicity, and again, they're going to help the cell maintain homeostasis, right? So these are all, they seem like different terms, they seem like different concepts, but they're all related, right? Equilibrium, isotonicity, homeostasis are all trying to get to that sort of balance point, right? And important for the proper functionality of that cell. The ribosomes we mentioned are the ones that are going to undergo translation, convert messenger RNA, the codon information, to help manufacture these primary structure of the proteins. And once we have proteins, we can make enzymes, we can make, we can continue modifying secondary, tertiary proteins. And again, once we have that, it's almost endless, the possibilities of what that cell can manufacture. So with that, again, I'm going to stop it there. Right? So the prokaryotic cell, I'll let you all kind of process all that information. And then the next presentation will address then our eukaryotic cells.